Look, today I wanted to give you an overview of the export market development strategy for vegetables that has been going on for the past 12 months. It's a Hort innovation project jointly managed by Hort Innovation and AusVeg. So basically, it's about setting a pathway for the next 3 to 5 years in market development. It's been a very comprehensive piece of work. It's involved, one of the things we got into when we first started this project is it's very complicated. You've got 30 markets and 30 categories, and as I say, you've got 900 boxes to try and look at it, and so you've got to make some sort of sense of it. So we've sort of tried to single down to the top categories and top markets. We've done extensive industry engagement. I've spoken to a lot of you in this room and others. We've got a methodology called Market Potential Index, which is the way we score, which I'll explain to you. We've got detailed dashboards of the key information about each market, top markets, and from that we've developed the data to support 6 business cases for market improvement or market access, and I think they're in the pipeline. I'm not exactly sure of the status of them. Michael Coote would probably be able to inform you on that. But also, it draws very heavily on our extensive experience as a company. So we've worked across the globe in a whole lot of categories for a long time. So we've got a fairly good understanding of how this market works. The first thing I want to show you is the Market Potential Index. Basically, it's a first cut way of scoring markets. And it really takes into account, it tries to get to what is the potential market we can get at. What's the size of the prize, the size of the cake that we could attack? And it sorts it out by, is there a population of people that have got the money to buy the product? Do they buy the product and eat it? And can we be competitive? It's pretty simple. It's an algorithm that's based on a whole lot of factors. It's all based on objective data, so it's not made up. So that sort of tells us how big the cake is. But the next thing we have to apply over that is what share of that cake we can get. And in some markets we can't get any because we haven't got market access. In others we're very competitive, in others we struggle. So we go through a second stage. So that the Market Potential Index is it's not the end of the story, it's basically the start of the story. And then we've developed the same for, and then we've got dashboards for every market. So we've got the Market Potential Index for all the top categories, all the top markets. So for every category, for 15 categories, we've got the top 10 markets. And then for each of those categories, we've got what we call dashboards. So it's basically how big the market is, what our share is, what our price competitiveness is. And also, as well as that, and I don't expect you to be able to read this, but we've put a sort of an estimate of what share of the market we could get and what sort of strategy we should adopt. And it's, as I said, in the main report, which is a 200-page report, we've got one of those for the top 10 markets for every category. So it's pretty comprehensive, and there is a plan to update that every year. I'm not sure what the status of that is at this stage. Why do we need a strong export sector? A lot of people say export's too hard. There's not much money and it's too risky. We don't know who we're dealing with. We don't know if we're going to get paid. But really, if we have that attitude, then our industry is really not it's not got a good future. Exports really are a way to increase the negotiating power with the local market. So we want to put pressure on domestic market. So even if we sold our veggies overseas at cost, if we could get a few thousand tonnes of each category off the market here, it would drive up our prices. So it's an overall story. And even if you don't export, you can benefit from exporting. So it's almost like, and in the case of countries like South Africa, they basically are export-oriented countries, and they use that to manipulate the returns. Exports really are a way to lift profitability. The domestic returns in most categories are quite often, for most of the year, below cost of production. The market floor price quite often is below cost of production. But the other point is that we've had a deflationary trend in exports. So it goes up and down whether it rained or whether it didn't or whatever. But the bottom line is that we've had a deflationary trend. And we're getting less for our vegetables in real terms now than what we were 10 years ago. Our costs are going through the roof and they haven't gone up. And the other thing too is that we've spoken to plenty of people who are making serious money out of exports. So they're not doing it for fun. we've spoken to businesses that are doing 80% of their product into export markets and making more money than they're getting out of Coles. So it can be done, but you've got to have the right sort of product. And the other thing too is that it's a way to reduce volatility. So if you've got two different channels to market, if one goes down, the other one will sort that out. So where and what's the opportunity? We believe that realistically we can double exports. Sorry, I'm a bit confused because I've lost my pictures off the presentation, so, but bear with me. Realistically, we could increase vegetable export by 350 million in 4 years. So even without any market access or market improvement, we've conservatively estimated that we could get a very big hit, and that's a 40% increase within 3 to 4 years. And we could double that in 10 years easily with some market access and market improvement. So what are the opportunities that are driving this? The first one, and basically our market zone is Middle East and Asia. And unfortunately, in a lot of the North Asian markets that are very potentially quite lucrative, we don't have market access or we don't have a workable practice. And so there's a job at hand to get long-term market access to the likes of South Korea for potatoes or Japan for broccoli or whatever. But there's a growing middle class of people who want to have a good quality product. There's a shifting habits from wet markets to modern trade. So modern trade is supermarkets, hypermarts, high-end restaurants, etc. So basically, a market like Singapore 30 years ago was 70% wet markets. Now it's about 10%. And we're seeing the same in Malaysia and in China and other countries. So we're getting the supermarkets growing. And the thing is that supermarkets want to have packaged premium products. So they attract a shopper who has the money, is prepared to pay for a better quality product. So we can't compete on price, so we have to be in those sort of channels. So there's no point in us trying to go into wet markets because we're never going to win. There's a growing demand for safe and traceable food from a reliable source. And Australia has a reputation for safety and reliability. And there's a growing demand for that. And as people get wealthier, they become more concerned about their health, and they want to know that what they're eating and what they're putting down their kids' mouths is safe and trustworthy. They can trust the labelling and so forth. And it's pretty important, and that's a competitive edge we have. And also there's a trend towards growing Western style food, particularly in restaurants where people are eating, Asians are eating asparagus, etc., that they never ate before, and they're eating avocados and stuff like that. So we're seeing a lot more of that happening. But the thing is, we have a once in a generation opportunity to build a sustainable and profitable export sector. We really, the point I want to make, and a key message I want you to go away with today is, we can't afford to be complacent. We've got to hit this pretty hard in the next 5 years, because if we don't, it'll be very difficult for us. We're well placed to take advantage of it, and we have a reputation for safe, reliable food. We have a geographic spread, so we can grow products from almost a year round. From the north of Australia right down to Tassie, we can actually produce almost 11 or 12 months a year for most categories. And that gives us a huge ability to have year-round supply, because supermarkets want to be able to deal with someone who can supply year-round. We're well located and well connected with Asian markets. So we are very close to Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, and we've got good connections and good shipping. We've got cheap air freight because of the backloading on air freight. So we can put things in to markets cheaper and quickly. So we can get product into Singapore in 8 hours, almost 12 hours off the farm to the supermarket. So that gives us a huge ability. And we've got exclusive and advantageous seasonal windows. So a lot of products are seasonal, and we've got a southern hemisphere advantage that the northern hemisphere can't do. I'll cover this one. We've got strong empathy with Asians, so they like us and they like dealing with us and they trust us. We have a large and sophisticated production of businesses, so we're getting some very big businesses that are very sophisticated, and they've got the capability and infrastructure to supply. But what's stopping us from getting there? And if you look at this graph here, we haven't moved. The exports today are exactly where they were in 1998. We've had a few hiccups on the way through. We had a bit of a push in 2001, 2002 when we had a devaluation of the dollar. But the other thing too is that most of our exports are in carrots, onions and potatoes. And most of our potatoes are going into processing into South Korea. Most of our carrots are going into Middle East. And our onions, we used to have a strong market in Europe, a strong window of opportunity, but that's becoming more and more contested by other suppliers. So what's stopping us from getting there? One's our price competitiveness. So we've got to have a much higher cost structure. And it's largely labour, because basically horticulture is labour. It's 70% labour. Our costs are higher. We can't do much about that. We've got very efficient farms, but there's not much to do. You can't do much to get rid of the labour, and we're not going to lower our standards of living. So the point about that is we have to have premium products that will support a higher cost structure. We have a lack of an export culture. We're not export hungry. When you look at the South Africans and the New Zealanders, they're hungry. We're not hungry. We've become complacent as an industry, and I think a lot of people are hungry, but I think as an industry we're not hungry enough. We have an opportunistic approach. So we're fair weather sailors. If we can get a better price in Singapore today than I can in the Brisbane market, that's where it's going. Tomorrow it's better in Brisbane, I'm not going there. You can't sustain an export situation like that because people want loyalty. They want you to be there every week, day in, day out. And we're opportunistic. We follow the price and so forth. We can't do that. We can't sustain that. Export readiness and scale. A lot of us don't have the scale and we don't have the continuity of supply. You need to be able to supply for a long length of time. And that means that probably if you're just a farmer in Tasmania, a grower in Tasmania, who can only supply for 6 or 8 weeks, you probably need to be in partner with someone in Queensland who can supply longer. But that's a major issue for us, and the scale to have the product going in year in, year out. Product suitability for markets. In most cases, we're about 50% more cost. On average, we're 50% more costly in most markets, and in some cases, we're more than double and 3 times the price. In things like carrots and onions and potatoes, we can get pretty close to the mark, but in most categories, we're not price competitive, and so we have to have a premium product. It has to be a better product, a better looking product, and it needs to be able to support premium prices in the niche markets. And it's got to be packaged well, it's got to present well, and it's got to be suitable for the market. We need commercial grade market intelligence. You know, we're relying on statistics that are historic. Our competitors know what's going on in the market every day. They know the New Zealanders and the South Africans, the Chileans, the Chinese would know what's going on in the major markets every day. We need to get to that level with commercial grade stuff where you can make commercial decisions. Historic statistics are not going to do it for us. Lack of our consistency, our branding. So Australian food has an image for safety and integrity, but we don't consistently brand that. There's different promises, there's different propositions and so forth. And it's a very difficult thing to do, but ideally we need to be able to copy the New Zealanders with 100% pure, where it covers everything from meat to seafood to horticulture to dairy and so forth. Fragmentation of industry resources, and if you look at it, the industry spends a lot of money on horticultural market development. But you've got Hort innovation, you've got industry peak bodies, you've got federal government, state government, local government, all having a go. And we're not really coordinated. So we need to be coordinated as a group because we spend a lot of money, but we don't spend it wisely because the state governments aren't talking to each other or not talking to the Hort innovation or whatever. It's not coordinated, and that's a major problem for us. So in most categories, we're not price competitive. We need to compete on non-price factors. And we need to customise supply chains. So you can't get a product that you were going to send to the Brisbane market and say, I'll put it into Singapore today and sell it for twice the price. It's just not going to work. We need to have the right variety. You know, they have different taste profiles. You know, they like things crunchier, or they like it sour, or they like it tartar or sweeter or whatever. We need to have the right size. It's all about genetics. The trim level, the quality standard, the branding, the supply chain, you know, air freighting or whatever, and service levels. So we really need to customise. And we need to build products customised for a market, for an each opportunity. So we need to get to the stage of actually growing a product, a variety, in a package with a supply chain and a service level for a particular customer, and do that on a year-round basis. And we can't afford to rest on our clean and green credentials. And I think it's a case where the industry in general in Australia started to believe its own bullshit about this. We believe we're clean and green and everything's going to be okay. I think the point I want to make is we're safer and we're more reliable, but we can't put our hand... we have got pretty good systems, but we're not on our own. There's others that are catching up. And people think the Chinese are growing vegetables in their own excrement and it's unsafe. The bottom line is they're investing big money with European technology. They're moving towards organics. They're going to improve their systems and they can do it a lot cheaper. So we have to move very quickly and we have to drive the product's integrity, but we have to drive the product differentiation, having products that are tailor-made to a particular market with a long-term commitment. What do we need to do? The key message I want to make is that we need to have a cultural shift as an industry from being opportunistic traders where we're in and out of the market when it suits us, when the price is right, to a long-term marketer of differentiated products customised to the target market needs. And it's 101 with marketing. Who's the customer? What do they want? What do they see the value proposition as? How do we get there? So that's what we need to do, and we've designed a plan to do that. And it's a 7-point plan, and I'm not going to try and read this today. This document is widely available as a public document, I believe, but we're looking at doubling the size of exports in 10 years. We're looking at a 40% gain in 3 to 4 years. I say 3 to 4 years because it was originally a 2020 plan, but the plan has basically only just been sort of, I guess, signed off. So the coloured boxes here are what we have to do, and then sitting below each of those is what we have to do to do that. So the idea of this is that the first one is to create an export culture. We need to create a culture of export excellence, and for each of these things we've got a program which are the sorts of things we need to do, and we've got a champion about who's going to drive it. In most of these cases it's AusVeg, so it's basically a Hort innovation project, but AusVeg managed, if you like. And the idea of this is that there'll be projects formulated by AusVeg and by industry and by individuals to actually deliver on each of these points. So the idea of this is it's not a wish list, it's not a shopping list, it's something where we're going to deliver those whole 7 boxes in the next 3 years. I'm not sure the status of this, but AusVeg have got a funding application to Hort Innovation for the next phase. I'm not sure of the status of it. We'll probably find out later today. But the idea of this is we're going to drive that pretty hard. So the first one is to get export culture. We need to develop products with a point of difference. And you can't put a wilted bit of celery in a plastic bag with a picture of a tractor on the front of it and think you're going to sell it for double the price in the supermarket. You actually have to have a product that's going to be well presented. There's technology around with packaging. There's a whole lot around genetics. There's plenty of guys, plenty of seed companies that have got products that will last longer. There's technology around packaging. So, people now can get 6 weeks shelf life out of fresh salmon at 3 degrees Celsius. So there's no reason why we can't ship crunchy lettuce to Singapore by sea. The technology's there. But as an industry, we need to be where the packaged food industry was 10 years ago. We need to embrace that. We need to understand the branding and so forth. So it's really customising. Part of it is to really, to really work with growers and support growers to actually develop product to suit the market. We need to devise a compelling brand proposition, and there's 2 levels to this. One is we need a brand proposition for Australia, because our brand proposition is about safety, and we need to have a uniform message. And the thing is, there's a series of messages and so forth. We need to be very clear about that. Now, it's very hard to get agreement across, and there's no point in doing it just in horticulture. You need to do it with red meat, seafood, milk, wine, the whole lot. And getting agreement across all of agriculture is very hard. People have tried, but we haven't got there. But the second aspect is the branding of individual products needs to be up to scratch. Because you're selling a value proposition, you're saying to a consumer in China or Middle East or whatever, please pay double for our products, but here's why you should pay it, So look at, you look at the marketing stories where, Big M put a brand on chocolate milk and, double the sales and outsold Coca-Cola. It's all about branding, Dynamic lifter is basically bird manure sold for $6 a kilo. It's called dynamic lifter. What's the value proposition? We have to have that, so we have to understand branding. And as an industry, we trail well behind packaged food. Most of our business in the past has been in the packaged food trade, and when you look at the way people package products and the way they understand branding and so forth, we have to understand the culture. We have to understand the language, the wording. Things that work here don't work in China or Singapore or Malaysia or whatever. You have to understand that. We need to be more collaborative. And the first thing there is we need to build collaborative supply chains. So our ideal thing would be to have a collaboration between some growers where they actually market under one brand or market collaboratively. Because a Queensland grower could work with a New South Wales grower, and a Victorian grower and a Tasmanian grower and put together a year-round package. So we need to collaborate in our supply chains to do that. We also need to collaborate as an industry. We need to collaborate, get better collaboration across the various agencies that are involved in it. So in an overseas office in China, for example, we might have 20 or 30 people sitting there promoting Australian horticulture from Queensland or from a local city or from the Agricultural Councillors, Austrade, whatever. We've got to get them talking to each other and agreeing on how we spend our money, because we're spending a lot of money, but everyone's spending it differently with their own ideas. So we've got to get coordination. And the other thing is that we've got to get coordination across the agricultural industries. You've got to work with red meat. The red meat guys have been around in markets for 30, 40 years. They've got local presence there. They understand it. They've got big budgets. We should be getting under them with hotel promotions and supermarket promotions. The same with seafood, the same with dairy, the same with wine. We've got big budgets. Put them all together. We can tell a really strong story. Supply chain efficiency. So we're not going to be able to get cost out of our production, but we can get some cost out of the supply chain. So we can actually look at ways to really drive some cost out through shipping consolidation, rationalisation, road freight, inspection and compliance, all those sorts of things. So I think that we could really, by better collaboration, we could take a lot of cost out, because a lot of the cost is between the farm and the customer. So it's a lot of money in there. It's about $5,000 for a shipping container. And you've got all these road freight costs, you've got port inspection costs, you've got compliance cost, AQUIS cost. We've got to find ways to get that cost out of it. And the other thing is we need to look at ways to maybe value add overseas. So why not actually send celery into China or whatever and pack it there? The labour's cheaper, you can get a better product out of it, it's access to technology, so why don't we think about that? Small value adding. So value adding is about how we further process. So we're looking at fresh cuts. So maybe there's good markets for fresh cut salads. There's good markets for trim product. There's good markets for semi-processed products. So we should look at those technologies. We should work with the likes of FIAL and others, universities and so forth, to look at what those products might be and how they could work. The thing about that is that they take away a lot of the problem with the freshness and the integrity of the supply chain. If you actually process it, semi-process it, you can get a very high quality product that presents well, that offers convenience and so forth. So there's fantastic technologies around there, but we really need to look at adopting those. Get in tune with our markets. We need to understand our markets, and we need to really understand their needs and so forth. So the key message here is we really need to customise to a market. We need to have a product package that, the sort of meat that a meat processor sends into Korea is different from the meat they send to Japan. It's different from the meat they send to China or Singapore. We need to get to that same level, and we need to understand what that is. We need to do market research. We need to understand what their taste buds are, how they like the packaging. They like a 1 kilo pack or a 2 kilo pack, all those sorts of things. We also need to get commercial market intelligence coming back, and there's ways to do that through smartphone technology and so forth. So we've got pretty good information about what's going on. And the other thing too is we should be looking at frontier markets. So you've got markets like China and Vietnam and so forth that are coming through that are not quite, the opportunities aren't quite there yet. but they will emerge, and we should be starting to get in there because the early moving advantage is really important. So we should be starting to build some bridges there. So basically, that's the 7 boxes. I've gone very quickly, but and as I said, I don't expect you to comprehend the detail behind it. But believe me, every issue that I've put up before has been addressed in a strategic way. If this program is delivered successfully, which I believe it will be, it will certainly have some impact. And so, we've got to get the job going. What's it mean for individual businesses? The first message I would say to you as a grower, don't even think about exporting unless you're serious about being a serious long-term player. If you just want to have a bit of a punt and see if you can get a bit of product out there for the next 3 months, it won't last. It's not doing you any good, and it won't do the industry any good. We have to be long-term, sustainable, reliable traders who are loyal to our customers and provide what they want. The other point I want to make is the product that you've grown for the domestic market probably won't suit the export market. Just because you're growing something to a coal specification doesn't mean to say that's going to hack it in a supermarket in Japan or whatever. We need to customise it to the market. So it's about tuning the market. And the third point I want to make is there's lots of different routes to market. You don't have to export yourself. You can export through a consolidator or whatever. There's a whole lot of different business models we can adopt. And I think it's important to understand if you're interested in exporting, how you might get that to market, what are the routes to market you could follow, and so forth. And there's a lot of information in our plan to help you along that way. My final point is, and pinching it from the Prime Minister, there's never been a better time to develop a strong, sustainable vegetable export sector, but we have to do it quickly because the window won't be there. If others get in, we'll never get in. We've got to be in there and entrenched and develop that market. Because what the citrus industry's learned and the apple industry's learned, if you let anyone else in, it's almost impossible to get them out. So we've got a window of opportunity. We need to move very quickly, and we need to be very focused on what we do. Thank you very much.